Hey, my name is Mike. I'm an AI enablement engineer here at Bitovi, and today I want to talk to you about using GitHub Copilot to run commands in the terminal. And this is one of the most powerful things you can do in Copilot, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, down in the chat window, there's this button for configuring tools. So let's go ahead and click this. Now, this shows us all the tools that Copilot has access to. And you can see here I have tools that are just built in by default, and then I also have tools that correspond to different MCP servers that I have set up. Now, these built-in tools, what they do is they give Copilot the ability to take action in your code base and on your machine. So there's all sorts of things we can do, like you can run sub-agents, we can open up a browser in the IDE, you can edit files, you can read files, you can even access the web and get information using this fetch tool. So all of these tools give Copilot the ability to take some sort of action and have more agency. But probably the most powerful tool is here in the execute folder, and it's called run in terminal. So in addition to these built-in tools, you can also run pretty much any command directly in the terminal, which gives you access to essentially every program that's runnable on your operating system. So anything that you can do in the terminal, you can do with this command. And it just really opens up Copilot to kind of infinite possibilities. So we're going to take a look at this command or this tool specifically today and just see how it works and how Copilot's able to kind of orchestrate these terminals and these commands. So down in the chat, the most basic way to use this is just to reference it directly. So we could say run in terminal, and then I'll just tell Copilot to run a specific command. So I could say run the pwd command to tell me what directory I'm in. Now, before we run this, I want to point out a couple things. Over here, I have a terminal that's already open. So I opened this terminal directly. And you can see here, if I run pwd, this is kind of the location where we're at. So this is the folder that I have open. It's just this app called Cart and Case Management. So now when I ask Copilot to run this command, the command will be run in this same environment. So let's go ahead and see what it does. So down here, you can see it ran the pwd command. We can take a look at this right here. So what it did is it opened up its own kind of terminal directly in the chat, and it ran the command, and then it was able to get the output. And you can see then it's able to read the output from that terminal, and it can tell me the information. Now, one thing to notice is that it didn't run that command in the terminal that I have open down here. It spawned its own terminal that it's managing. So this is kind of the first concept, is like when you ask Copilot to run something, it will manage its own terminal, and then it can kind of facilitate the communication back and forth. All right, so let's ask it to do something else. Now, you don't always have to use and reference the tool directly, so I don't have to say run in terminal every time. Instead, I could just ask for something, and then if it's appropriate to use the terminal, Copilot will do that. So I could ask, what Git branch am I on? So in order to figure out what Git branch I'm on, it's going to need to use the Git command in the terminal. And so down here, it figures that out, and then it runs it automatically. So you can see here in the thinking steps, it uses this run in terminal tool, and it runs that Git branch command, and then it's able to read the output and reason about it. So this is kind of the loop. It's you ask Copilot to do something, it runs the command that's appropriate to do that thing in the terminal, and it can just kind of figure out what command is appropriate. And then it uses the output that it gets back in order to go on to the next step or give you an answer. So it's really this kind of like back and forth feedback that's really useful. Now, another thing I want to point out is down here in the actual terminal window, you'll see we have this one hidden terminal section down here. So once again, when Copilot's running these terminals, it's spawning and managing them itself. And you can see all of the terminals that Copilot has access to and that it's kind of facilitating down here. So if I click on this one hidden terminal, you can see it opens up another terminal window here. So I could actually like rename this. So this is the one that Copilot is managing. So this is the same terminal window that Copilot was using up here in order to run these commands. And you can see here's the pwd command that we ran, and then here's that git branch command. So this terminal and this Copilot chat, they're kind of linked. So over here, I can ask Copilot to run like the tests in my app. So I could say, and I'll just use the direct command, run the npm test command. Exactly. So now it should run the tests, and you'll see how not only do they get run over here, but they also kind of get run over here. So these two terminals are linked up. So this is a way of being able to, essentially like view the same terminal that Copilot's using, but down here in this same window. And there's another thing as well, another kind of useful tool. So I can like highlight text down here in the terminal, and then I can say terminal selection. So this is another tool, and generally you want to reference this one exactly, or you could just tell Copilot that you have something selected. But I could say like, how many milliseconds did the test take? So I'm highlighting this, or I'm selecting this text, the amount of milliseconds that the tests took, and then I'm asking Copilot essentially to read that. So what it can do is it can read the selection that I currently have. So this is a good way of being able to like select something from the terminal, and then Copilot can use that as context. So you can see here the selected text shows 156 milliseconds, which is exactly right. So this is similar, like if I had some code over here, maybe in this, just one of these test files, like I can highlight code and then I can attach it as context to the chat window. It's the same idea as you can attach, terminal selection as context into the code base. All right, awesome. So this is essentially how Copilot is able to manage terminals. Now, there's another thing as well that Copilot can do, which is it can manage long-running tasks. So this project right here is a web app. So I have multiple like web servers that it runs on. So imagine you have a web app, or you're running some backend server, and it just kind of stays running and it waits for requests, right? This is pretty common. So Copilot can manage terminals like that, and we call these async terminals. So I could ask Copilot, run the dev server, and it should be able to figure out, because I have a package.json file down here with all of the kind of commands that Copilot can run. So it should be able to figure out how to run the servers. Now you'll notice down here that it's running these. So it's running this dev server, and then it's able to manage that and keep track of it. And then it's also running this kind of like web client server. And I realize this is kind of jumping around a bit, but essentially now we have two servers that are running, and we can take a look at them. So here we have 3 hidden terminals. So the first thing Copilot did was it killed any existing servers. And then we have these 2 servers down here that are running. So this is like my web app that's running. And then up here this is like a backend server. Now, depending on your app, you're going to have different servers, but the idea is that Copilot can manage long-running terminal commands as well as ones that kind of terminate immediately. So we would call the long-running ones async commands. And then if any logs show up in these servers, Copilot can actually read them, which is pretty cool. All right, so once again, you want to make sure that you're managing these hidden terminals. Like anytime you have those, just make sure you're aware of which ones Copilot has access to. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you open up a new Copilot window, this new window no longer has access to these terminals that the other one ran. So it's just something to keep in mind. All right, now one last thing I want to talk about when it comes to managing the terminal is using skills. So over here in this project, in my .github folder, I have this skills folder. And in here, I have a bunch of skills that tell Copilot how to use the different commands and the different, sort of terminal commands in my app. So once again, I have this like package JSON file. This just has like all the scripts that my app can run. So it has just, essentially terminal commands. And then in these skills, I'm telling Copilot how to use those and just how to use the terminal in general. So you can see here we have this like commit skill. So let's take a look at this. So this commit skill tells Copilot how to commit code in my code base. So it's essentially telling it how to use this git command directly from the terminal. So the first thing it does is it checks to see what changed. Then it runs the tests. Then it stages the changes. And you'll see I'm giving it a step-by-step flow for what to run in the terminal. So now if I said, commit the code, what it should do is read this skill, and then it'll know exactly what commands to run. So it reads the commit skill, and then it's going to start running these commands just like we instructed it. So this is a really good idea when you have like multi-step workflows where you're running different commands. You can just have Copilot kind of step in here and do all of those. So that's one for committing. There's another one here, for example, for like running the tests. So it'll tell Copilot like what commands to run, which different commands, work in different scenarios. In this case, we have some end-to-end tests. So it's a good idea to just take any of the kind of terminal commands that you might need it to be able to work with or run, and then create skills around them. And then once again, you can just reference these here in the chat. So I might be able to say like deploy, and I have a deploy skill, which tells Copilot how to deploy and kind of like all the commands that it needs to run in order to do that. So this is kind of a good way of just being able to keep track of all this stuff and being able to have Copilot use skills in a way that's really effective. So hopefully you learned something. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this and how to wire up these skills and how to like really up your game when it comes to managing these types of terminals, here at Bitovi, we do tons of trainings around this stuff. We have a really good debugging workshop that goes into this. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description below. But otherwise, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for watching and keep innovating.